Our next speaker is Dr. Andy Turko. He's a comparative physiologist, and he works here at McMaster University with Graham Scott and Sigal Balshine. His primary research interest is in understanding the behavioral and physiological strategies that fishes use to cope with changing environmental conditions. He's been obsessed with fish since childhood and even taught his grade 6 science teacher the word ichthyologist on an assignment about what he wanted to be when he grew up. And my precocious 10-year-old confirmed that that term has something to do with tonight's talk. Over to you, Andy.
Hi, thanks very much, Joe, and thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. So today I want to talk about some of my work on the endangered animals in our own backyards. So first, I'd like you to all just take a moment and think of an endangered animal, the first thing that comes to mind. I bet the first thing that popped into mind for most of you is some sort of exotic mammal, maybe something like a rhino, a giant panda, perhaps even a Siberian tiger. It's very natural, I think of these amazing mammals from far off places for us here in Canada. But today I'm here to convince you that we need to spend just as much time thinking about endangered animals that live right in our own backyards. So Canada is home to over 800 species at risk, which means that these are organisms that are in danger of extinction. And of these 800, 363 are classified as endangered, which means that they are very likely to become extinct in the near future. And as you can see on this map, these endangered species really are concentrated in the southernmost parts of Canada. And that obviously also tends to be where most of us live. So these endangered animals really are in our own backyards. And of all the habitats we have in Canada, freshwater ecosystems are perhaps the most threatened of all of them. Almost 1 in 3 freshwater fishes and about half of our bivalve mussel species in Canada are currently considered at risk of extinction. And so my job as an aquatic biologist here at McMaster is trying to understand how we can better conserve these freshwater animals. And in particular, I've lately been really focused on this incredible endangered fish called the redside dace, pictured here. And these are gorgeous animals that would be right at home on a tropical reef somewhere. But redside dace are actually native to streams across southern Ontario. This species actually used to live in Spencer Creek, although sadly they haven't been found there in quite a while. One thing that makes redside dace so fascinating is that they are primarily aerial predators. They actually jump out of the water and capture flying insects on the wing as the bulk of their diet. In fact, we think redside dace might actually be the only species of fish on the entire planet that makes their living doing this kind of thing. That behavior makes them really fun to watch in the wild, but this behavior also makes redside dace a really important conduit of nutrients between the terrestrial and aquatic worlds. They're really important for the streams that they live in. And we know that redside dace populations tend to crash as their habitats get urbanized. So this map here shows the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. And streams here in blue show where redside dace populations remain to this day. But red areas here are places where redside dace have been lost to us. And what I want you to notice basically is that these red areas basically tend to represent places where there's been a lot of urban development. But prior to my research, we didn't really have a good idea of why exactly urban development was so harmful to redside dace, which made it really hard to conserve this species. So my research uses a lot of these streamside experiments to measure physiological limits of fish like redside dace. So I do things like catch fish in the wild and house them in small containers pictured here, while I adjust the parameters of the water that surrounds them and I evaluate the physiology of the fish in response. And one thing my work has really shown is that warm water temperatures seem to be really harmful for redside dace. And this is particularly important because we know that urban development often brings with it really increased temperatures. So this phenomenon is often known as the heat island effect. So this is a thermal image of our backyard, the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. And what I want you to notice is that urbanized built up areas sort of here and down here in red and orange are about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius warmer than surrounding undeveloped areas. And so what this means, this urban heat island then causes this background increase in water temperatures that can really be damaging to aquatic life. But urban streams are also subject to some sudden spikes in temperature when it rains. And so on this graph, the y-axis shows you water temperature in an urban stream, and the x-axis just shows 1 day of time. And this arrow here shows a rain event. And what happens is when it rains in a city, we can see increases in stream water temperatures of up to 8 degrees Celsius. This is because the rain hits really hot pavement before it flows into the adjacent waterways. And this kind of spike is exactly the opposite of what you see in a natural system, where rainfall tends to cool things down. And we think that these sorts of thermal pulses, these extreme temperature spikes when it rains, are really, really important to consider for endangered species like redside dace. But there is hope, thankfully. So restoration of urban streams, like this project pictured here, this is some bank reinforcement being done by volunteers working with the local group Ontario Streams. This kind of thing helps keep water flowing and keeps summer water temperatures low, which really helps redside dace and many other aquatic organisms. Well-designed urban infrastructure, things like this rain garden here that help reduce stormwater runoff into our urban waterways, also really helps to control these thermal pulses. So overall, I hope I've convinced you that we should do more to protect endangered species like redside dace that live right in our own backyards. Of course, there are many strong economic reasons to protect these animals and the ecosystems that they depend on. Our freshwater habitats provide really valuable drinking water and recreational opportunities for millions of people. There are actually more than 9 million Canadians that live just within the geographic range of redside dace. But beyond that, we also have a duty, I think, to protect nature just for nature's sake. I don't think our children should have to travel to far-flung places around the world to witness the marvels of nature. We have some incredible treasures right at our very own doorsteps, and I hope we could do everything possible to keep it that way. Thanks very much. And I really, before I answer some questions, I really want to thank a wonderful team of people I get to work with, and particularly thank the Hamilton Community Foundation, which has funded most of my postdoctoral research. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your talk. I wanted to share, I went on a hike a couple of days ago by McMaster at Coutts Paradise, and there was a sign that talked a little bit about redside dace, and I thought immediately of you. So it was really interesting to see something so close to home about your research. And we do have a couple of questions from the audience. So the one we'll ask now is, what do you think we can do as individuals to help our local species?
Yes, everyone wants to, or not everyone, sadly, but lots of people want to know what they can do to help, and that's great. So I would say sort of the most impactful things that individuals can do would be things like planting a rain garden on their property, doing something to make sure that their downspouts don't feed directly into a storm sewer, do something to help rainfall infiltrate the ground, plant a pollinator garden that brings more insects for animals like redside dace to feed on. But ultimately, I want to just say that many of these problems, we search for these individual solutions. And I just don't think that any number of individual actions is really what it takes. These are big systemic problems. They need big solutions. So the best thing an individual can do is sort of be informed and vote and support policy that is actually going to help endangered animals.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. And the two questions that we got for Andy are actually quite similar, and maybe something that I identify with, as I have quite a few fish at home myself, and that includes tetrafish, which kind of look like the redside dace. So I guess, yeah, the questions are, can we try to keep some of these cute little fish as pets, or can we help this vulnerable fish species to be bred in captivity? Perhaps maybe our fishery farms can assist with stocking the population.
Those are fantastic questions. And Connie, you're right. Redside dace are actually quite closely related to the aquarium tetras. They're all cyprinids, which is kind of cool. So is it possible to keep them as pets? I mean, yes, as a researcher, I have aquariums full of them on campus at McMaster, and they do extraordinarily well in captivity. Legally, can you keep them? No, absolutely not. So please don't keep them, at least until recovery efforts are further underway, and it's okay to collect them from the wild. But so the more serious question, I guess, can these fish be bred in captivity, and what can that do for conservation? That's something that's really near and dear to me, and something that I spend a lot of time as a researcher doing. We have worked to establish captive populations, and we have tried to get them to breed, but this is where I can introduce another really interesting bit of redside dace biology. They lay eggs in nests every spring when water temperatures start to warm up, but they don't build their own nests. They actually take over the nests of other minnows and lay their eggs in there. They're kind of these brood parasites. And that makes it really hard to breed them in captivity, because you're not just trying to breed redside dace. You actually need to try to breed 2 species of fish and get them into good condition and everything at the exact same time. So it's been a struggle. We're doing fun things with like 3D printed models of the host fish to try to simulate nests. We're trying hormone injections, but we also can only try for like 1 week a year, because they just breed once in the spring. So it's logistically very challenging. But yes, we're working on it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. And I guess also it's probably difficult since they're aerial feeders. I'm not so used to, trying to feed my fish above the water, so that might pose a challenge as well.
So they'll learn to eat in the water, but it's actually, so it's very fun to hold fish over the tank, or hold food over the tank and watch them jump. And when you bring them in from the wild, they are hilariously bad at eating in the water column. They'll sort of try to grab food and they'll miss a bunch of times, but without competition in an aquarium over a few weeks, they do get pretty good at it.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Andy.